Hello everyone, so I recently uploaded this cyberpunk girl kind of a scene that I made in Blender, and a lot of people have been asking me how I made it and if there can be a breakdown or a tutorial of some sort. So that's what I bring today. It's not going to be like a step-by-step tutorial. It is just going to be like a breakdown of what I've done and just what I thought about during the process, and basically how I got to this point. So without any further ado, let us begin. So as you can see, we have our scene right here. We have our render mode here, which we can turn on or not, but I've just kept it off for now. So I'm just gonna break it down to a few different things and start where I started from. So you can use a few different reference images. You can use ideas, inspirations that you get from all over the internet, on pictures, on social media, on basically anything that you find even in real life. So after you have an idea, that's a whole separate sort of a video and sort of a thing of how to get inspired, where to do your research from, what kind of references you require, all that kind of stuff. But after you have your idea and you know what you want to make, and when it comes down to actually creating the thing that you imagined, it can sometimes not come up as you think it would. For me, I want to start with the background. So I use Kitbash 3D. This is their cyberpunk kit, basically, from which I downloaded a few different models. Basically they were all the same size, and I kind of rescaled them up and down and positioned them according to my camera. Obviously the first thing you have to do is set up your camera. So if I just go to my camera real quick, here, okay, so this is my camera. How I set it up was, basically I just like to, if I just hide everything right now, I just like to create a new camera that comes to the origin, right, and reset everything, so I know everything is going to be nice and straight, and then I just kind of rotate it 90 degrees so that anything that I place, it might be HDRI, it might be models, whatever, I know at least I have some sort of reference that it is on the origin, and it's not just completely randomly in the air somewhere. And then I move from here. So after I imported this camera, I got my buildings. Obviously I hadn't placed them in this kind of a layout before I set up my camera. So first of all, I just grabbed a random building, which is this one. Sorry if I just turn on my foreground, which is this one, and I like the rooftop part of it, so I just kind of chose this randomly. So I got my camera and just kind of placed it on the rooftop, because I wanted it to be like I am this girl, whoever I'm gonna make this character is gonna be like on a rooftop looking out into the kind of city and onto the other buildings. So you can just kind of place it, and that's why my camera is right here. So I'm just going to delete this camera, so delete this. So once I have my camera set up, I kind of just messed around with these buildings, placed them where I liked, according to what I thought looked good, and obviously I kept changing these during the course of my making it. These buildings actually were not even used. I think these 4, 5, they were just placed and they're not even in the scene. You can't see them, so I just put them on the side. But obviously you don't have to use Kitbash. You can just download different models from Sketchfab or 3D, CG Trader, TurboSkid. There are a few different ones, or if you bought any of your models or whatever. Anyway, so after you have this placed, you kind of get a rough idea. Now if I just turn on the rendered mode, at this point I just have a default HDRI, which is kind of weird looking over here, but it would have just been a normal HDRI. That's kind of, obviously I've cranked it up here, but it's just a normal one. Let me see. Yeah, and obviously I wanted this to be a daytime scene, so I would have placed it to 0, but if you turn it completely off, you might realize that there's like no ambient lighting, sort of. So instead of making an ambient light, I just cranked this up to like 0.05 or something, just so I get like nice a little bit of like bounce lighting, and maybe a sky as well that you can or maybe can't see. That's why I increase the contrast to 2, so maybe you can see it a bit more, and then with the volume and stuff added, it kind of gets dimmed up a bit. So that's how I started basically. So this is once we have our background. This is just like a step-by-step thing. So I'm just going to turn the background off and turn the foreground on now. So what we have in our foreground, as I said, is just this building, which was part of the asset, and all this kind of thing was already pre-modeled or whatever, existing. I did add a few things. For example, if you look at this generator, this is also just part of the pack, or you can just get these random things. I added random trash bits to make it look real, a bit more like someone actually was up here, and this is like a generator or whatever, and a few like computers and stuff that's kind of just laying around. There are like these what do you call them, like steam exhaust things, and then we have these planes which I just added. I'm not sure if you can see it here. These planes with just like smoke. You can just use these planes with like a smoke texture or something, like an animated a video file or anything, and just place it, or you could use real smoke obviously, but this is way easier and you cannot even tell. And I'm just gonna hide these for now. So yeah, so we have this. Now the difference is, I mean, it doesn't start out like this. As you can see, I have a few lights, so let me just hide these lights. Yeah, I think that's it. So if I even take this out, so this is the emission that we're getting if we go over here. So we've got like an emission going on this logo. This is obviously, we can just move this out of the way as well, but that's what's basically giving us this subtle light, and that's it. And then it's just the HDRI at this point. If I actually try to take this off as well, is there any other light? Where's the light source? Yeah, it's just like the light from the actual building and stuff. It's not light produced. It's not like it had lights, and these like emission things were already in the building. So let's just reset that. So that's what we had, and this ground plane did not exist either. This was the actual kind of the ground on it. So what I did was I added this plane because I didn't like the ground on here. So if you just look at this plane, it's not anything. If you just go to our shading tab, I mean, it looks pretty complicated from here, but what it is basically one of those materials from Polyhaven. It's like a concrete floor material that you can get. This is just all the mapping, but if you just you can use their add-on, or you can use just like a Control Shift T, and you can just add all these. So basically it looks a little more complicated than it is. The ground texture, the actual concrete, had its own roughness channel. Like it had its own roughness material that if we just plug this in directly, let me see. right? So this was the default roughness of it, which I didn't like because I wanted it to be like a little wet and rainy. So I unplug this, and it's just a simple noise texture with a color ramp to kind of give it a little bit of this kind of roughness. And then I made another noise texture and mixed it so that I can just make it a little bit more detailed, and it's just not all uniform, sort of just breaking it up. So this is the default texture that I ended up with. Anyway, so I use this. Let me just unhide everything. So after I used this, I had a nice ground texture. I added like these lights. Now these lights I added after I introduced my character to the scene. So let me just introduce my character, which is this. So it's just a simple model from Blender Kit. It's a free add-on that you can use. It's free and paid. Just got a bag from Sketchfab, and just basically you can rig. She's already rigged, so I could like pose her however I wanted to, sort of like whatever. So I kind of positioned her on this, sitting that way, kind of looking into the city, and then this is just a sphere. Basically I kind of chopped out her hair, cut out her hair, if you just see, because I didn't like the hairstyle that she had on originally, and it's just a ball with a particle system with a hair system on. And this took me quite some time actually, and this would be a whole different video as to explain how I got to this result, but there's a lot of tinkering, a lot of playing with. Finally got to a position where I was happy with it. Obviously if you go up close it's not that good, but I had to play with it according to the angle that it was going to be seen from. So if I just look at it over here, well obviously she looks terrible, not even realistic or anything, but the idea was to have her as a silhouette and just have like light hair and stuff. So if we look at her here, it is a silhouette, but it wasn't interesting. So what I did was I added area lights to kind of I guess augment her, or like to make it focus, make the viewer focus on her instead of something else. So the first light is over here, which I added because I wanted there to be like a backlight shining through the hair, and so kind of giving the hair like depth. So where there's more hair, the light won't pass, and then where there's less hair, there's kind of like a bleeding of light. So just to give a nice effect. Also then I added this second light, which was on the back. The purpose of this was just to give like a nice rim light sort of thing around the bag. Otherwise without this, if I just hide it, it's just like it's totally black. You cannot even see like the curvature or anything. I hardly tell if it's a bag. So just added that, just a bit of a, I mean I could move it around. I did play a lot with it, and that was the position that I kind of ended up with. And then this third light, which is this one, which I did add on this side just to give a bit more. I mean I could have moved this one as well, but I just liked the fact that this kind of added to the whole effect as well. So now we have sort of a silhouette, but as you can see now we have some rim light going on, and we can actually see like some nice lighting instead of, if I just hide all these, you can see it's very dull. I mean this is coming from this emission from the actual logo, which is pretty good, but I just wanted to augment that a bit more. So so yeah, so for the hair it did require obviously this turbulence, there's this wind field, force field and everything, but that's about it for the character. So after that, I kind of ended up with basically the foreground and the background. Let me just add that back, which kind of obviously reflects into the kind of roughness channels that I made earlier to give like nice reflections. The only other thing I added was these ropes or cables or whatever you could say that are just over here, just to break it up a bit, because these are just curves, basically Bezier curves with just a random material on them. If I just remove these, let's see, it looked fine, but it just looked too clean up here and not so natural, I guess. So with the cables going, it looks like it's actually part of a city or a rooftop or something. Now an interesting thing is the background here looks a bit too clean, so that's where I added the volume. Now if I add the volume back now, you can see, let's see, so I added the volume, which is basically just a cube, which I added over the whole kind of city, and it's just a principal volume with just a density, really low density. There's no fancy things going on there. What you could do if you have a slower computer, and these are actually a lot of polygons, you can see like 8 million tries, so that's kind of a lot. But since the background doesn't actually move, or it's not like a parallax or anything, it's just because the camera animation is just front and back, like to and fro sort of, and I think it might crash. So you could actually just remove your foreground and your character obviously, and then just render out this background as a backplate, and then just insert it as an image as planes, and then you can have the just one plane sort of. It might not look exactly the same, but it'll probably look good enough, especially if you use the volume and everything before you render, to kind of give it that nice look. It'll still give you those reflections if you kind of have it set on an emission, as these are emissive materials. I did go ahead and animate these. If I just go into the shading tab, I'm able to show you a bit better. If I just grab like a random building, let's see this one. So which one was it again? I forgot. Yeah, it was this one. So these are animated holograms or logos. Some are just flickering with a noise modifier. Some are actually like I have keyframed the location just to kind of get it moving a bit. As you can see, these kind of move in the X or Y direction, whatever, just to make it seem like there's a city and it's like changing ads or something. Yeah, so if we go ahead and add the foreground back in, now you can see what our sort of scene looks like. The only difference is I can't really make out the character still, even with the lights. There's not enough separation between the background and the foreground, which I felt was not good, because then there's not enough focus going on the character. So that's where the second cube comes in, which gives a nice like layer. Basically, if you look at this second cube, it's a smaller cube just behind the character, and it gives like a layer between the foreground and the background to kind of distinguish between them, and that actually probably made the biggest difference in kind of making this character pop, and kind of separating this part from the background. How I made this was, if I just show you this material, if we go into the shading tab, so this is basically a principled volume. I have a color ramp with a gradient texture. That's to control the gradient, because the box or the cube is actually to the top, and with this gradient I can kind of control how high it is, because obviously I didn't want it to be very high. I just wanted it to be just sort of where the character is, not like to the top. So you can control the fall off from here, and obviously with the gradient texture. And if I just change, like, you can change the colors if you want it to be more, and these are all in the emission strength, because I've seen that if you add them to the emission strength, you don't need light, because with volume, if you don't have light, you don't see the volume. It's just like black haziness, which doesn't look that good. And then obviously I didn't want it to be totally dense, so you can't see through it. So that's why this other color ramp comes in. This is for the emission color. The reason for this is because if I take this off, it's just gradient ramp. Even if I change the color, it's just too solid and it just doesn't look interesting. So with this plugged in, it's a noise texture with a color ramp, so that we can I mean, you can play around with the scale, you can play around with the color ramp and set it up how you want, and then you kind of have both things. You have the texture, the gradient texture, and you have the noise texture kind of going into one. You could kind of mix these and then use a factor and kind of plug it in, but I just like this idea better. It gives me more control, and I still got my density to play with, so I can like make it as dense as I want. Obviously that's the whole idea behind this, that you don't want the density, so it's at a really low value. And then obviously just if we can keyframe the location. So if we just go to like our yeah, so we can just keyframe one of these so that it looks like one of the, like the smoke or whatever is kind of moving up, and it's still gonna have that gradient cutoff. So that's nice. Alternatively, you can probably just use a 4D and control the W, but I don't think that looks as good as maybe using it like smoke or fire or something. So that's how I made the volume. Now if we go back and unhide everything, so this is our final scene. It's the camera movement is just a quick sort of just going back and forth, nothing to it. The camera settings is 25mm. You can change that. I did play around with this as to what I liked, how much of the floor I wanted to see, how much of the building. I set all these camera settings up basically not right in the beginning. I had it at 50 I think in the beginning. I didn't like it, so I kind of changed it a bit and played around with it, and then I ended up on 25. Obviously when you do change these kind of things, you're gonna have to look at your background and everything to make it fit and make it like according to your actual camera. There's no depth of field on this because I wanted to see everything, and there wasn't really like it's not like a portrait shot or anything. I tried the mist pass, which I didn't like. There's nothing much to it, just a random water tank as well, just to give some more of a mid-ground-ish element, you could say. Obviously it's not realistic, none of this is, it's probably not even to scale, to be honest, but it's not about being to scale or realistic as long as the end product looks good. Obviously if you look at it from any other angle, it won't look good, but that's the whole point of 3D. So yeah, I think that is pretty much it. These drug signs and stuff animated, with a noise texture, just the noise texture, a noise modifier, just to like keyframe the intensity of the emission, and basically tweaking things here and there. There is this drone I added at the end too. It's also from that Kipesh kit, just a path, and it's just following the path. It has a few lights on it. I added a light underneath it just to kind of give it a nice glow as it's moving through the kind of scene, and that's it. So we basically, if we break it down to how we make a good scene, I'd say there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. There is this rain that I added at the end. There's an add-on called the Bugger Rain Generator. I think it's messed up now. Oh no, it's here. So we have this rain. It's just an add-on that generates rain for you basically. It's pretty good because it has rain. It gives you these raindrops on whatever it's falling, as you can see. It even gives you nice puddles or whatever, splashes or something when it kind of drops onto the ground, which is pretty good. But you can keep adding any of these things. You can add dust elements, you can add trash, all these kinds of imperfections, all these kind of little details to kind of improve your shot. So yeah, the few things that I would say that you have to look out for in a scene is, first of all, set your camera up, because if you don't have your camera set up, you're going to be all over the place and placing unnecessary stuff. Even though I had my camera set up, I still have some unnecessary stuff in my scene. So you need to figure out where your camera angle is, or at least a ballpark, so that you can move it around a bit, but you should have a general idea of what your scene is going to look like, as in from camera angle point of view. Secondly, you need to have, obviously you can either divide it into foreground, background, midground, or have a subject, which really causes the viewer to focus in on something, instead of if I just remove this subject. It's a nice scene and all, but it's not got a story. There's nothing to focus on. I don't know what I'm supposed to concentrate on. I mean, it looks all good, but as soon as you add a character in or a subject in, it could be a car, it could be a character, it could be anything basically that grabs the attention. So now you know that there's something related to this girl, there's something related to this character going on. Why is she up here? What's she doing? I mean, the possibilities are endless really. You could have anything up here. So that's the second thing, that if you have a subject, it just makes it easier to focus on, and also you can get away with imperfections or like something that doesn't look so good in the rest of the scene, because not everyone's going to be focusing on the rest of the scene. This is all peripheral vision, and this is what we're focusing on. So even if, for example, this doesn't look so good, or there's something in the background that's kind of off, the textures, the lighting, whatever, your focus is going to be here. But obviously then you have to make this part really, really good, so that if you are focusing on this, you know that it looks good and it doesn't look off. The third thing is, I'd say that volume is awesome. If I just remove the volume from this scene, it just looks flat. Do you see? Like, it looks, first of all, there's no separation for this character, so I don't know, I can hardly even tell she's there unless I really focus on it. So my eyes are struggling to find her. And second of all, even if you don't have a character and you just look at that scene, it's just one big scene. Everything's clear. There's no sense of depth, because I don't know how far this is from the foreground, and it just looks too CG. But if you add the volume in, you can tell that this is further away because it's a bit hazy and a bit dark down there, and then as you come closer, it's clearer and clearer. And then obviously you have this separation if you kind of use this volume setup. So volume is a lifesaver. It is kind of costly on your like system. Not costly, it is super heavy for your system, and obviously you can't really use it all the time, but like I do, I just unhide them when I'm not using them the scene. Once I've set them up, I unhide them, so it's just it just comes out in the rendered when I render it. Apart from that, I can move around my scene easily without it kind of bugging me. Otherwise, if I have volume in, I could not quickly real-time cycles it like this. So yeah, so volume really helps. That's the third thing. Fourth thing is, after you've made your scene, or the basic elements of your scene, like a background, foreground, a subject, try to add in as much detail as possible, not with high poly or high resolution textures or anything like that. The detail comes with the small things that you see in real life, like these newspaper articles and magazines and cans and stuff, these cables, some dust particles, some you notice random things. Even this rain, if I take the rain out, it kind of makes less sense. I mean, it looks good, but then it's just an extra element, so it just adds more character, more story to the whole scene. Like I added these computers. I mean, there's really no need for them. I could remove them. I mean, and the scene would still look fine with them gone, but it's just random stuff that you can kind of put in, just to populate your scene with things. So yeah, I think that's about it. Usually you get to about 80% of your scene is done in like 30% of the time or 20% of the time, and then the next 20% you add to kind of really add the details, really getting it to look good. That can cause you to, that can like take up like double amount of time. So yeah, just keep practicing, and hopefully you'll be able to make good content. I mean, you're always learning. I'm still always learning. There's so much stuff that we can do. Look at this. How good does this look? I could even use this scene. Like, that looks so nice. Like, she's on the top of a building, you kind of see her. I don't know what this character means, this whatever Japanese or Chinese symbol. But yeah, it looks cool. I could actually just render this out, raining and stuff. Maybe not such a contrasty background, but if you're able to move around, you kind of get nice ideas as well. So that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below, and if you want me to make more tutorials or breakdowns or anything else, feel free to let me know. Thank you, and bye bye.